Hello YouTube, welcome to another episode of Loudness War. Today's episode is all about the spectrum analyzer, what it is and why I should use one. Let's get to it. Okay then, so what is a spectrum analyzer? Well, I guess most of you already know it, but just a quick reminder. Let's get some loop going so we can see and hear it. So, spectrum analyzer shows the distribution of energy of frequencies across a range. We can hear and see loud frequencies below 100 Hz and quieter frequencies, let's say over 10 kHz. Well, that seems pretty simple, but there is more to it, and there are some use cases where spectrum analyzer turns out to be an indispensable tool in any engineer's arsenal. Surprisingly, not many people use it, but I will show the use cases for that too. Now you may ask, but why would anyone want to watch the spectrum if they can just hear the music? What's the point? Well, and the answer is there are at least two kinds of problems that cannot be heard by human ear, but they can be tracked with spectrum analyzer. Namely, these are DC component and subsonic components below range of human hearing, and on the other end of spectrum there are supersonic components that may cause aliasing. So, what is a DC component? DC, which stands for direct current, is basically a constant value of a signal, and that is equivalent of zero frequency, which we cannot hear, but our gear can. This is analogical to a compact speaker moved away from its center position, so that its range of motion is already limited, as its max displacement is not very far from its current displacement, and this way, long story short, we are losing some dynamic range. But there is also another kind of problem. Namely, a DC component fed into some effects such as distortion can cause all kinds of unpredictable problems, and it's often difficult to track. Here, I have an artificial demonstration that will show how does it impact the dynamic range. Let's play it. Okay, so we've got some very simple sound, but additionally I added a second operator here playing at 10 Hz, which is below human hearing, so we can't hear it. If I turn it on and off, then you can't hear a difference, but watch the fader. Around minus 18 dB. If I turn it off, that we suddenly see it drop about 8 decibels, but the sound is still the same. This means that this extra subsonic components is taking away 8 dB of our headroom. So we can't hear it, but we can see it clearly on a spectrum display that there is some low-end random. Now we can combat this problem by enabling high-pass filter, and voila, the sound didn't change, but the low-end component is gone, and we reclaimed our lost headroom. So what does it mean? We can push the signal much higher and much louder. So that's the point of the show of Loudness War, right? Now onto the aliasing. I've got an FM synth with bright harmonics running here. Additionally, there's distortion pedal that adds a lot of high-end fuzz. Watch the spectrum. Moreover, I'm running the entire project at oversampled 88 kHz. So we can see on the spectrum analyzer 10 kHz, 20 kHz, 30 kHz, and 40 kHz. That's way beyond human range of hearing. However, there is something here, and again it's eating up our headroom. But there is also a bigger problem. If you take exactly the same project and try to run it at a regular 44 kHz, something great, then this will alias, which means everything above the half of frequency, 22 kHz, will fold back into audible range, causing harsh and nasty distortion. And this cannot be recovered anymore. However, while we are at oversampled frequency, then we can combat it with a low-pass filter. I've already have one set up here. Let's turn it up. See? The high frequency is gone, and the filter is still running at only 22 kHz, so it's not filtering out anything we could hear. All that's left is what we can actually hear. This is actually how many plugins are running internally. They are oversampled and the low-pass filter to remove unwanted components. However, that's not solution for everything. As you can see here, the pedal from Ableton is not oversampled. So we need to do that on our own sometimes. And if we are running at high sample rate with Spectrum Analyzer enabled, that becomes pretty easy. So use that trick from time to time. These were some edge cases, but the Spectrum Analyzer is actually very useful in everyday sound design and mixing if you're using synths. As synths, unlike acoustic instruments, can have their spectrum all over the place, and it's important just to get a starting point and know what you're working with. Let's take a look at some examples. Again, this is this FM synth, but now a bit toned down. These are gentle harpsichords. You can hear and see there are components somewhere in a mid-range. But now, if I modulate the operator, this will be a radically different distribution of frequencies, even though their values, the individual values, are still the same. If you are using some even wilder modulation on FM synth, that this may easily get out of control, but the Spectrum Analyzer always tells you where you are. More on FM synthesis in another episode. But let's move on to something different, additive. Let's play a pad from a loom. Notice that there are some extra random drops on the high side of the spectrum. And notice how do they appear randomly. Every time at different positions, so it's different to track them by ear. And this also means it's difficult to equalize them if they are random. So, in this case, the Spectrum Analyzer gives you a good starting point on where you are and what you need to cut or boost. Again, another example. There is some screaming preset from Serum. Let's play it. Here we can see different things. There is a very solid bass fundamental and very loud, and there is also some very active component in high mids, let's say. There is also some apparently DC component here that needs to be removed. And so on, and that's all just from the view. You can take a look at Spectrum Analyzer and see it immediately where you are, what you're working with, how to fix it, how to improve the sound. It's much more effective than doing all that by ear. Because if you are mixing by ear, then first you need to play sound, hear that something is wrong, think, how do I fix it? Maybe this, maybe that, try, maybe fail, try again, and finally say, that was probably better than a quarter ago when I started, or not. And mixing with spectrum analyzer, especially when equalizing, just makes this process much faster and streamlined. That's how I work, and that's how I get the tracks finished. Okay, now it's time for a practical example. Let's use isotope CO to remove a resonance from a synth. Let's play it. Pretty harsh, right? Now, you may be familiar with technique that people will tell you to sweep a filter and track resonance by ear. While it's technically correct that it's so inefficient nowadays, we don't need to do that anymore, really. I mean, that's ridiculous. You can just take a look at the spectrum and tell, right, the resonance is here. If there's a peak in frequency, there is a resonance. That's definition, there is no denying that. So I could just point straight away to that peak that I see and cut it. Let's adjust the hue. And now let's compare. The gain matches on, so the bypass signal and filtered signal will have just the same volume. Let's compare. Again. Now it's flat like a saw signal. And that's how we do it. That just takes a few seconds. The main advantage of spectrum analyzer is that it's automatic. It's never tired, and unlike you, it never has a bad day. It always gives same result for the same input. Unlike humans, it is a scientific fact that a person can listen to a sound twice and hear something different every time. If you ever had this problem that you spend minutes tweaking some effect that was in bypass mode, then you know what I'm talking about. And spectrum analyzer is a way to avoid this issue. Well, now, which spectrum analyzer to pick? Well, I use several ones that are nice. Firstly, there is a spectrum built in Ableton, which has pretty nice scale readout. Quite clear, but tiny and not that practical. Then there is a free plugin Signalizer with abundance of options. Spectrums, windows, scales, colors, everything that you ever wanted. But most importantly, I use isotope plugins, Ozone in this case, that all have built-in spectrum display that immediately shows what's going on and what are you doing to the signal, right where you need it. For sure, you shouldn't be using the Fruity Loops EQ. It does have some kind of display, but unfortunately, it doesn't really display the spectrum, so you can't tell from these flashy lights what actually is going on. Just pick your favorite. Well, different spectrum analyzers will have a little bit different visual output, so just pick one that works nice for you, get used to it, and just learn what a correct spectrum usually looks like. Just stick with it. Last but not least, I claim that there is some optimal spectrum distribution that you can use as your reference. I've been using this technique months before Isotope finally came with the tonal balance control, which is pretty simple. Spectrum analyzer with long integration time, in layman's term, it's very slow, and it just shows you an average curve for your spectrum. I mean, in the fine view. In a broad view, from Isotope standard is about useless, and people were making reviews based on this view and probably didn't think twice what they are even talking about. This is ridiculous. So let's switch to fine view. There is a preset for EDM, average spectrum. And I guarantee if you get your track to fit on that bright line in the middle, the white line on the bright line, right? It will sound awesome. So just try it. There are different presets. This is EDM. There is different orchestra, completely different curve. And I'm actually using reference for uplifting trance. It's Kinetic Acid Engine. I really like that track and I just stick with it. And I get it every time. So across many tracks, there is a consistent sound and it just works for me. So just go and try. Okay, that will be it for today. What do I tell you? If you like the content of this channel, hit like, follow and subscribe.